All right, I'm going to admit I have kind of a bad habit here on YouTube of kind of assuming that everybody that watches my channel at all has heard everything I've ever said on this channel. And that's obviously not true. I've been tagged a lot of times everywhere, it seems like, over the last week or so about some recruiting stuff, mostly involving Georgia and Texas, but some stuff with some other schools too. Now, those of you who have been paying attention for a long period of time will remember that I used to make individual player recruitment videos back in the mid 20 teens into kind of the late 20 teens. There's a couple of viral videos I made specifically about certain recruits not choosing Georgia or being committed to Georgia and then flipping to another school. There's a Aubrey Solomon, a defensive lineman that ended up at Michigan. There's a what was the wide receiver's name? Demetrius Robertson. That went to like Cal or something, then did end back at UGA later. So anyway, I quit making recruiting videos on individual players for the most part because I quit following the recruitment of individual players. And this is what I mean at the beginning, where I sometimes assume that everything I've ever said on here is heard by everybody that's ever watched this channel for any amount of time. And I know that's true so in other words, I'm getting tagged and all this stuff over the last week. And I'm like, why are you asking me that? You know how I feel about the recruiting of these individual players. But the reality is a lot of people don't know. So I figured I'd take a minute here to address it on this video. It's no surprise or shock to me when any player from anywhere that's being recruited by any team ends up here, there, or somewhere else. Like, it just doesn't, it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody anymore. Now, a lot of what's going on now, or a lot of the attention that's being put on some of these recruitments now is like focused solely on NIL or revenue payments, or, you know, oh, this player is only going here for the money, or he's only going there for the money. And in a certain sense, that's not new either. The source of the money that people are blaming or crying about is new. But I mean, how many years in a row did Alabama finish with the #1 recruiting class under Saban? Those 9 or 10 years in a row or something. And every single year you'd have some people that would show up and go, well, they're just buying the players. They're just paying the players. Now, it was never proven. Alabama under Nick Saban never got found guilty of any sort of major recruiting violations, never got put on any sanctions, probation. Nothing was ever found or proven. So as far as I know, they were doing it the right way. But the point is, in other words, I've got the recruiting rankings pulled up right here. Now, this is 24/7. Some of you are going to say, oh, you should use On3, or so you should use this, or you should use that. You can use whichever ranking service you want. I'm not here to tell you any one ranking service is better than the other. I'm old, and so I've been looking at 24/7 as long as I've been looking at recruiting rankings. So anytime I have a question about recruiting rankings or whatever, that's just where I go out of habit. The rankings are similar from site to site, but this is the 24/7 composite ranking, which is an average ranking of all of the recruiting services. So this isn't just 24/7's ranking. This is their ranking averaged against the other major rankings. But so, like, you know, what I care about when it comes to recruiting is who's here. And who's here all the time, which is even more important. You'll be able to find some teams in the top 10 from year to year that are sort of here one year, gone the next. That's good. Like, it's not bad to have a top 10 recruiting class. But the way I view recruiting rankings is kind of on a 3 or a 4 year rolling average. Now, it's a little bit different now because of the portal. You're able to supplement your roster with players that you didn't recruit out of high school, or at least they didn't sign with you out of high school. But generally speaking, if you sort of follow recruiting rankings on a 3 or a 4 year sort of rolling cycle, you're going to have a pretty good idea about what the best rosters in college football are. I mean, Southern Cal, this is a great recruiting class for Southern Cal. It's a little bit of an outlier in that it's been a long time since they've had a recruiting class ranked this high. Georgia, on the other hand, has had, I think, 9 top 4 recruiting classes in a row, top 5 recruiting classes in a row. Texas A&M a couple of years ago had the #1 class, but they're not typically in the top 5. Notre Dame bounces around a little bit within the top 20 or so. Texas, and this, of course, is the team that's getting all the attention right now. We're going to talk about that in a second. They're 5th right now. They always, at least lately under Sarkisian, recruit really well. Here's Alabama at 6th. Again, these aren't the final rankings. Signing day's not till December, so, the Alabama fans are going to say, oh, wait till December, we'll be number 2. Maybe, but here, I don't really draw that big of a distinction between number 1 and number 6 or number 2 and number 5. Like, I get it that it's kind of a, it's an internet trash talk point that you can use. Like right now, if you're a Southern Cal fan, you can say, ha, 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 we've got a better recruiting class than Notre Dame or Georgia or anybody on here, right? If you're Texas, you can say, ha, 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 we got a better recruiting class than Bama. If you're Bama, ha, 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 we got a better recruiting class than Ohio State. So it's kind of a trash talk thing. The reality is, though, if you're recruiting in the top 10 year after year after year after year, it becomes less important that you're number 2 or number 6 or exactly which number you are. Again, it's the cumulative total of 3-4 recruiting classes in a row. Where do you rank? And that's sort of where 24/7's talent index comes into play. I'm not going to get into that today. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. But that's how I track and follow recruiting. I look for outliers in the top 10. I look for teams that are consistently in the top 10. Miami under Cristobal has recruited well. Oregon recruits well. These are not surprises. LSU, good recruiting class this year. Ohio State, always a good recruiting class. Same with Bama. Texas lately too. Georgia, of course, we talked about. And then, Michigan at 11, Clemson at 12, Tennessee at 13. It shouldn't really be a surprise that a lot of these teams that you see recruiting in the top 10 or the top 15 are the same teams that you find in the top 10 and top 15 of the final season rankings in a lot of years, right? Talent equals wins. I've been beating this drum on this channel since the beginning of time. It doesn't mean that every single team that signs a top 10 class is going to finish in the top 10 every single year. It's obviously not what it means. But more times than not, good players equals good records at the end of the year. So this is how I track recruiting. So when I get tagged all the time about what do you think about this player that didn't go to Georgia or went here, or this player chose Texas and he never even made an official visit there, or I guess there was a running back yesterday who had Georgia and Texas among others in his final list or whatever, and he chose Texas, and a big deal was made about it because Georgia's been recruiting him since he was in the 8th grade or something, and he never took an official visit to Texas, and people are saying, well, he went there for the money. Of course he went there for the money. What's the problem? That's a recruiting tool now. As far as I know, Texas didn't break any rules. With NIL and revenue share, you're allowed to offer these players amounts of money. I don't know why pointing that out is supposed to be some sort of an insult to Texas. Do I wish Georgia could get whatever player it is, the running back, or wasn't there another one last week too, a linebacker or defensive lineman or something? Came down to Georgia and Texas, and he went to Texas. Do I wish Georgia had those players? Yeah. I wish Georgia could outbid Texas and get them. There's nothing wrong with that. We got to adjust our mindset here. It used to be when Alabama finished with the number 1 class every year, people would say, oh, they're just buying the players. And the insinuation was that they were doing something wrong, that somehow they were breaking the rules. They were whatever. Again, where's the evidence? Where's the proof? Oh, they cover for the SEC. Do they? Because Ole Miss and Tennessee have both found themselves on probation in the last 10 years. No, they don't cover. So anyway, I don't know whether Bama cheated or not, but I don't think they did. They never, anyway. So this idea that the sort of connotation, when you hear people say, well, Texas, they're just buying these players, or, oh, these players don't care about anything but money. You don't know that. Look, if the player would have came to your school, then he wouldn't have cared about money, and he would have. This is the world we live in college football. Now, I'm not trying to convince you to like it. There's a lot not to like about sort of the world of college football in general right now, and specifically recruiting and how it relates to NIL and how it's used. And I get it. There's a ton of problems with it. I've talked about them for years here on this very channel. But the insinuation that somehow Texas or the player that goes to Texas is somehow doing something wrong, I disagree with that. This has been happening as long as there's been recruiting. There's been players that you thought were going here and ended up going there. And again, even before NIL, when things like that would happen, people would say the same things they're saying now. Oh, he only went to Texas for the money, or he only went here for that. He's scared of playing time at such and such school, whatever it is. Look, these are in a lot of cases 16, 17-year-old kids making these decisions. They're being offered nowadays life-changing money. I mean, come on. If you work at McDonald's and Burger King offers you 5 times the money to do the exact same thing you're doing at McDonald's, you're taking your happy ass to Burger King. You're not somehow loyal to McDonald's instead of making 10 times the money at Burger King if you had that option. I mean, so I don't blame the teams. I don't blame the coaches. I don't blame the players. Are there players out there who money is their number one consideration? Sure. I'm sure there are. Are there players that development and getting into the NFL is their number one consideration? Yeah, sure there are. Playing for national titles. Yeah, there's some players that look for that as their sort of their number one thing they want out of a college program. But whatever it is the kids decide they want and wherever it is they decide to go, that's a decision that they're free to make. Again, as far as I know, Texas isn't doing anything wrong here. The NIL floodgates were opened for better or for worse. This is the landscape we're in. If you're whatever team you're a fan of, if they were doing what Texas is doing, you'd be loving it because you would have the number 5 recruiting class instead of Texas or whoever, whatever. You see what I'm saying? And again, you can blame NIL and I do too. NIL has a lot to do with what's going on. You can blame NIL, but this isn't a new fan reaction here. Again, this has been going on forever. Anytime a fan thought a recruit was coming to his school and they didn't, it was because the other team paid him, because he was scared to compete, because whatever. It's never just, well, the kid decided he liked the other school better. It's kind of like Ohio State fans never admitting that Ohio State got beat because they played a better team. Like it's never happened. Fans have never just gone, well, he probably just wanted to go there. He probably just liked that school better than mine. It's always like there always has to be some underlying sort of underhanded thing or reason why the player chose the school that you didn't want him to choose, right? Now, now that I've got that out of the way, and let me move on to sort of the other side of the argument a little bit. The House settlement that passed a couple of months ago and went into effect on July 1st, which enables schools to now directly pay the players $20 or $21 million a year total across all sports. Part of that House settlement involved a clearinghouse, a third-party company that was supposed to be going forward, again, effective July 1st, reviewing every NIL deal that was signed in all of college athletics. There's a website, a sort of portal, not a transfer portal, but a separate sort of website that all the schools now have access to. And they're required to enter all of a player's or recruits or whoever's NIL deals into this computer system that is then forwarded to this third-party company. They are supposed to be reviewing the NIL deal. Any NIL deal over $600, they're supposed to be reviewing. And if the NIL deal supposedly is supposed to be a clear business relationship between the player and a company, is that happening? I don't know. It doesn't seem to me like the whole NIL apparatus or whatever has been reeled in or slowed down at all, which is sort of the way it was sold to us when this thing passed, when the House settlement passed and the schools started paying the players and they said, oh, we got this clearinghouse. They're going to review all the NIL deals. If it's over $600, it's going to get turned down unless it's a clear business arrangement. Is that happening? It needs to be transparent, I think, because here's the thing. If it's not transparent, then we're just going to assume it's not happening. I think we're well beyond the point here of taking someone's word for it, like, oh, yeah, trust me, bro. We reviewed all these Texas NIL deals and they're all legitimate business purposes. Trust me, bro. I don't know. I mean, I've thought this from the beginning, and I realized that there are privacy concerns and things like that. And I'm not an expert, and I don't know exactly how to navigate around those. But I've said from the beginning of NIL, and I feel even more strongly about it now that we have this supposed $600 magic number where anything over that is supposed to get reviewed and then turned down if it's not a clear business purpose, that all of these NIL deals, I feel like, should be made public. I think we should know how much Arch Manning is making this year through both revenue share from the school itself and any NIL deals. I feel like we should know whatever recruit signs with whatever school. I feel like it should be public information what sort of NIL deals he got. What company is it with? What are his obligations under that NIL deal? Because supposedly that's what this third-party company is doing, reviewing all that. But again, trust has been lost amongst us fans in college football because we have seen money completely roll over everything that we spent a lifetime coming to love about college football. While everybody sits back with their hands up and going, well, there was nothing I could do about it. It was out of, the schools point at the NCAA points at the courts point at the schools. It's just a circular firing squad where no one wants to take really any accountability for what's going on. And they all just pass the buck around. And as fans, we don't ever really know what's going on. And there's a million examples of this I could give. That Nico making $8 million out of high school. Do we really know that? No, I mean, we don't really know that. Carson Beck making $4 million either last year at Georgia or $4 or $5 million this year at Miami. Like, do we really know that? Or have we been told that and we just sort of go with it? I really think, like, if this stuff was more out in the open, if we knew what Georgia was paying, so every school can pay basically $21 million across the board to all their athletes. Don't you think we should know what they're paying Gunnar Stockton at Georgia, what they're paying Nate Frazier? Georgia is a public institution funded by taxpayer dollars. Now, I get it that a lot of the money that comes into the athletic department is through private donations. But shouldn't we know? In other words, we know what Kirby Smart is being paid because he's a public employee. He's the highest paid employee in the state of Georgia. Kirby Smart is. He's a state employee making $10, $11, $12 million a year. So we have to know. It's the law. Shouldn't we know what the university is paying Gunnar Stockton, Nate Frazier, Colby Young, KJ Bolden, CJ Allen? Should we know what the schools are paying a player? And then shouldn't we know what NIL deals they have so that we feel confident and comfortable as fans that this $600 rule that we were told was going to curtail all of this crazy NIL stuff? Shouldn't we know so that we can believe what we're being told? Again, I don't say any of that to shit on Texas. Texas is playing, as far as we know, within the rules that everyone else has to play in. I don't know what's going on with the $600 NIL cap. I've got no idea. But there's been no allegations or anything against Texas that they're doing anything wrong. And as far as I know, they're not doing anything wrong. They've got more money than some other schools. But somebody, look, this is the United States of America. Okay? Capitalism. Somebody is always going to have more money than somebody else. Period. Whether you're talking about schools and universities or whether you're talking about you or your neighbor, either you or your neighbor, one of you makes more money than the other. It's just the way it is. So there's nothing wrong with Texas having money that South Carolina doesn't have. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But if we're sort of waving the flag of parity and trying, even playing field, and we're putting these rules in place and blah, 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 $600 NIL cap, or it has to get reviewed and approved. How do we know that's happening other than they're telling us it's happening? I mean, so that would be the only issue I have right now. And that's not even directly tied to recruiting. That's sort of a tertiary issue to recruiting. Texas is killing it in recruiting, period. You could say it's because they're buying the players, but that's the world we live in today. Okay. So that's not against the rules. Now, question remains. And I heard somebody say this the other day. To be fair, it was a Georgia fan. Georgia is recruiting a team. Texas is recruiting a bunch of individual brands. That's what the sort of the talking point was, is like, oh yeah, Georgia's missing out on these players to Texas, but Georgia's getting players that want to be here, that love Georgia. Georgia's recruiting a team. Texas is just recruiting a bunch of individual brands. Yeah, Georgia wanted a bunch of those individual brands until they gave Georgia one of these and went to Texas. So let's not act like they're not great players over there. They are. It is a fair question though. Sort of mercenary team versus sort of more of a grassroots team. I mean, I don't know. If you look at like money spent, and again, we don't know these numbers. We were told at this time last year that Ohio State had the most expensive roster in college football. I don't know if that's true. You don't know if that's true. Watching this video, we were told Ohio State was paying $25 million, whatever it was, for last year's roster. Again, we don't know that because none of these figures are public as far as NIL deals or whatever. But we were told Ohio State had the most expensive roster in football last year, and they won the Natty. We're being told now that Texas has the most expensive roster in all of college football, and it looks like they plan on keeping it that way with this latest recruiting surge and the amount of money rumored to be going out. But so is Texas winning it all this year? Is money the end-all be-all is what I'm asking. I don't think it is. I think it's an advantage. I think having more money than another team is an advantage. In the same way that having a better offensive coordinator than another team might be an advantage. In the same way that maybe having everybody has this now, but back in the day, some school might have an indoor practice facility or a nutrition program that some other school didn't have. It was an advantage for the school that had the indoor practice facility and the high-tech nutrition program versus the school that didn't, right? It was an advantage. It's an advantage, I think, that Texas has money. It was an advantage last year that Ohio State had the highest paid roster. Is it a guarantee that those teams will win the national title every year? I don't know. I mean, we're going to find out over the next few years. But anyway, I'm not mad about any individual player choosing Georgia or not. I'm not excited about any individual player choosing Georgia or not. I used to be in the mid-20 teens or whatever. It got just too stressful. These kids, commit, decommit, uncommit, recommit. Well, this team offered me this amount of money, but this team's offering me a little bit more. It got to be too much. And so I quit following the individual recruitment of players about 10 years ago. I follow now the rankings. And specifically the rankings over a rolling 3 or 4 year period. Are you recruiting in the top 5 every single year for 3 or 4 years? If you are, you're probably a national title contending team. If you're recruiting in the top 15 3 or 4 years in a row, you're probably a playoff team. That doesn't mean you have to do that to make the playoffs. It's a very good indication that you might. Anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on it, all the tags I've got over the last couple of days. Appreciate you watching. Have a good morning.